Shin, sound on. Say something, Alex. Let's see if you're working. Shin,
Hello,
sound
can you hear me?
on. Say something, Alex. Let's see if you're working. Ah, there's an echo.
Hello,
Sound
can you hear me?
on. Say something, Alex. Let's see. Hang on. Let's just. Ah, there's an echo.
Hello,
Sound
can you hear me?
on. Say something, Alex. Let's see. Hang on. Let's just. Ah, there's an echo. Okay, that should be better. I just had to mute myself. Right, I think we're here. Alex from the British Red Cross. Hello, and how are you?
I'm great, thanks.
Good,
How
and
are you?
I can tell now you've said that the audio is working, so that's good. I wasn't 100% sure this was going to work. We have a number of people watching. Exciting. Good. Feel free to ask any questions. We've got Alex from the British Red Cross here. We're going to talk today a little bit about your fundraising product that you've been working for, well, almost a year to the day, actually, if we look at where we are
Yeah.
in time zones and all that sort of stuff. So, I suppose you should introduce yourself. Who are you?
Um, I am Alex, and I work in the innovation team, or the fundraising innovation team at the British Red Cross as a product development officer. So
Excellent.
we're pretty much like a product development team, the way
Yep.
I look at it.
And so, innovation, you've done like plenty of products before. What sort of took you to this? We'll call it for now the gaming world. Where did you sort of look at it and think, okay, there's something in this?
Um, I guess it's two places. One is seeing the hype around it. I think there was, and there still is, probably even more so now, a lot of hype around gaming for fundraising because just the sheer numbers, um, the amount that you can raise in such a short amount of time is. I can't really think of any other situation where that can happen so quickly um, with so little potentially prep involved. And the second thing, I suppose, is going back like 10, 12 years. I used to be a gamer. So I had an interest in the market from a kind of personal perspective, which I think is always good when you are doing like product development, is to have a genuine interest in what you're building. So that it was kind of those two things aligning um, was the starting point for this. Oh, I can't hear you, Tom.
I know. So, as much as it was a very logical product, it was also very much a sort of a personal pet project as well. There was a bit of personal passion behind it.
Yeah, definitely a bit of like emotional as well.
Yeah, really, really important to have those things. So, just to sort of headline information, the last year, how's it gone? Really, as bold as I can go there. Just how is it?
Yeah, it's gone just unbelievably well. I think so. We launched our first product, as you said, about this time last year, and in that time, I think we've raised almost 500,000, which uh, when we set out, I didn't really know how much this might raise, but it was certainly nothing like that amount. We've got someone who's joined our team and is looking after this product full time. So it's like created a new role. Um, and yeah, all we see really is just more opportunity. Um, there's so many different directions this can go, so many like paths and avenues that we haven't even begun to explore. So yeah, it's gone really, really well, and we're even more excited about where it could go.
Yeah, you and me both. And you got a new person this year, so they've obviously going to have their work cut out for them a bit. Um, let's also I should add. Bordolio has said, "Damn well done, British Red Cross." So damn well done to you for that. If anyone's got any sort of live questions they want to ask, just pop them in the chat. I'm constantly looking at it. If you see me looking in this general direction, that's what I'm looking at. If you see me looking this way, I'm looking at Alex. Um, So I made a load of notes. Let's have a look at some of the fun things we were going to talk about today. In terms of, so question, you get asked a lot of questions from a lot of charities, right? Like people do get in touch with you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So in terms of a question I think we both get quite a lot, marketing. How did you get the digital influencers? You know, you've got some people on there who've raised like 30K plus, and also how did you get sort of the mass
Mhm.
participation? What was the strategy here?
I suppose the initial strategy we had, the product's like changed quite a lot since we started.
Okay, so maybe we should
Um,
start with what was it and what is it now? Maybe that's a better place.
yeah, okay. So it began um, as an emergency product because I think we had this underlying assumption that we thought that this audience, which is quite young, um, quite compared to normal charity audiences, quite male dominant. We had this assumption that the cause they would care most about within all of the work that we do was around the climate and emergency stuff. So we ran what's called a sprint, which is like a quite focused week where we would take like an idea, develop it, and then test it with the audience. And the idea that we came up with was this emergency like fundraising team essentially. So when there's an emergency somewhere, a crisis, we mobilize this team to go out and fundraise for us. So that was like the core concept, and I think it still is a part of the product now. But as I said, it's kind of evolved from that. So we first launched um, during coronavirus, which we saw it as a really good opportunity to launch this product because it felt like an emergency. It was all anyone was talking about. I think everyone can kind of understand how much coronavirus has dominated just the news and what people care about over the last year. But also just the changing behaviors. Like it felt, particularly around March, April, May time, everything kind of stopped. Like all sports stopped. There's nothing to really keep us entertained.
It was the start of the
Um,
surreal, wasn't it? It really like everything that we
yeah,
were used to gone.
yeah. So and people were just spending all their time inside as they should have, according to the rules. And and people were looking for different ways to entertain themselves. So there was this huge like surge of people turning towards gaming, who were turning towards Twitch for new kind of routes of entertainment. So it just felt like a really uh, there would never be a better time to launch this product. So we did, and it kind of bombed to begin with. So the approach we took to begin with was around the influencers. So we thought, okay, let's contact a lot of influencers and see if they want to fundraise for us for coronavirus, because a lot of what we were doing was kind of responding to that work across the UK. And we managed to get 12 influencers. By influencers, I mean like partner Twitch streamers. We managed to get 12 to take part in this
And
like
was that done
24-hour
just
event.
by making phone calls and saying, hello, would you like to do a fundraiser for us? Or was it a little bit more complicated?
Um, I mean, it wasn't phone calls. I definitely wasn't calling these people up. That'd be a very personal approach, which probably wouldn't be well received. Um, it was, it was kind of it was a very laborious process, if I'm being honest. And I don't know if you've never done like sales or cold calling before. It's also a very thankless task. It's a soul sapping task because people don't respond, and when you're going out and going out and going out and not getting anything back, it can be crushing in some ways. Um, but we did get some responses, and generally what I was doing was just going onto their Twitch profiles, or Twitter, finding their emails and just trying to come up with some sort of personalized approach and just emailing them and chasing up. And the chasing up is a really key part. I think people often feel a bit, think if they haven't got a response once, they feel a bit even more uncomfortable to kind of chase it up. But actually, it's the chasing up where you get most of the responses. I don't know. I don't know whether it's just because they think, oh God, this guy's not gonna not gonna let up. So I might as well just say something. But yeah, that's how we.
So you got your initial 12 there through.
Got the 12.
Yeah.
Ran the event, and it raised, I think it was about 10, 12k. So not too bad for like a first
pretty decent
dive into the market. But it took an enormous amount of effort, and it was probably the most stressful thing I've done since like university. So yeah, for that reason, I probably wouldn't recommend it.
So it wasn't just let's just put a picture of someone enjoying games on our fundraising page and just watch them come in. It wasn't quite as simple as that.
No.
No.
Sorry, what do you mean by that?
Well, in terms of like creating a fundraising event and trying to recruit people, you didn't just sort of say, cool, okay, well, how do we target these people? We'll just stick a picture of someone playing a computer game and tell people that it's great and hope for the best. It was very an active outreach program that you did. It was very much sort of let's contact people, find people and make it happen.
Oh, definitely. I think you have to be very, very lucky to like onboard or acquire, or however you want to put it, particularly influencers without any kind of like proactive approach to it. Can you hear me all right? I think it's lagging a bit.
I can. Are you getting a bit of a lag? I'll turn you up. Hang on. Now you are louder.
Maybe it's just the video that's a bit laggy.
It's probably my internet, to be honest. Though it's yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think you have to be proactive with these things. You can't just expect to put something out and then everyone to suddenly flood to you. I mean, people like St. Jude's could potentially get away with doing that now, but they're very established and they've been going for I don't know how long, but lots and lots of years, and they've got a very dedicated following. That's the kind of thing you have to work towards. Yeah, it was definitely an active approach that we took.
So, and if we look at that, that's how. So it started out as a let's just try and get as many. Like we'll just try with these 12, see what happens, how it goes. And now, what would you say the product is now? I mean, is it? It's quite a. I don't want to. I hesitate to use the word organic, but what would you see it as now? Is it mass participation? Is it fundraising? What would you classify it as, maybe?
Yeah, I would call it mass participation. So it's definitely organic. We've paid for it. Yeah, mass participation. I think we over last year we've had I think about 8,000 people sign up.
That's a big number.
We haven't had that. It's a very, very big number.
And in terms of those 8,000, how do they compare to your traditional fundraiser?
I mean, in terms of the audience, they're much younger. So part of the remit of our team as a fundraising innovation team is to approach new audiences and kind of diversify the income. So we should be targeting generally younger audiences. The great thing about this one is that it's also, as I said, kind of a lot more males than we usually get. So yeah, younger male. Probably. Oh, no, actually, I'm speculating here, so I'm not going to say anything.
Fair enough. I won't put you on the spot there. It was more that because I mean, in terms of it's certainly in the UK as we consider what a traditional fundraiser or donor is like, we generalize, but actually actively ignore a younger demographic, I guess would be a polite way of saying it. And you see it all the time from TV adverts into the way the marketing is sort of geared in a particular angle. And what you've done here is you've said, all right, okay, under 40s, there's quite a few of them. how do we find them? And obviously there'll be people over that over that age bracket as well, but with a sort of like, okay, let's speak their language, as opposed to talking the language that we are used to, I guess, and picked up a whole bunch. A question has come from Hydro Medusa, so get ready for this one. Can I ask, how did you select influencers? Did you search by particular games or by number of followers? I would love to hear what your answer to that is.
So how did we go about it? To be honest, actually, one of the best things I did was I searched for people who had streamed for the Red Cross, not even just the British Red Cross, but just the Red Cross in general. In over the last few years, because they're the people who already, I suppose, care about your cause. You want to get people who really actually do care about your cause. That was the first thing I did. Then obviously I went through probably what every charity does, which is you try and target like the biggest. By biggest, I mean like the ones with the most followers. And I think probably invariably every charity finds that you can't really get them because I think once you get to a certain size, start to choose for yourself what you want to do, what cause you care about, and you don't need to be approached by a charity to realize who you want to fundraise for. And probably they've been in the game for so long that they're very familiar with charity streams, and they don't need like hand holding through that process. So then it was a case of just going through other kind of big UK streamers. There's so many out there.
Because I remember like pre-COVID days, so over a year ago. You know, you did some really. If you want me to stop talking at any point, just say, Tom, that's my personal secret. Don't tell anyone that. But I mean, you were attending events and meeting people in person, and I mean, I would argue that you were incredibly proactive in the space. It wasn't just sort of a matter of scrolling through Twitter. It was you jumped in the deep end of the community and were like, right, I am one of you, and my charity needs money. that was sort of that was my, like, I remember bumping into you at one of the Twitch meetups, and I was like, oh, Alex, this is great. I'm so glad a charity turned up here because these people are wonderful, and you are very welcome here.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, whenever we work on a new product with a new audience, we try and understand that audience as much as possible, because it's just finding out like the way that they talk, what they're actually doing. So I went to, as you say, the Twitch events, but also just other gaming events, just to figure out like who the audience is, what do they look like, how do they talk. And I chatted to people at these events, chat to people at the Twitch events. I wouldn't say I necessarily went there as an acquisition, with an acquisition hat on. It was more just to get my head around who the audience were. But I think getting your face out there, at that point we hadn't launched anything, so I felt a little bit, I felt like a bit of an imposter, I suppose, at the events. If I went to them now, I'd feel much more comfortable. Just going there and just chatting to people, showing that you're human, showing that you are genuinely trying to understand them. It makes so much difference.
Yeah. And I mean, what sort of happened with that, if I look at some of the amazing fundraisers that have happened, I will sort of going to go off on a minor tangent here, but sort of to highlight the success, because you created a bit of an you established yourselves as a charity that people can fundraise for on Tiltify, but also through live streaming or through engaging, and to make a difference. More importantly, I've noticed that with all of your campaigns, they're very much cause-led rather than event-led. So you might say, do a game, but then it's like, this is what it's going to help. You're going to help these people and these people and these people, and I need you because we need to help. It's very, the game, in inverted commas, is very much it's quite loose, if you don't mind me saying so, and to your benefit. But then what you've managed to do is, like with the awful disaster in Beirut last year, You managed to get two absolutely massive streamers just find you randomly. And
Mm.
I would never use the word luck,
Yeah, and
but I mean, that must have been a pretty
yeah,
exciting moment.
it was for sure. And I think that's like an indication of what can happen. The the kind of larger and more established you become, the more that kind of luck happens to you. So we've only just started, but by that point we'd only really just started, and yet we had like two massive, as you say, massive streamers just organically happen across our event and fundraise, and they fundraised. Well, they raised so much money, um, and I suspect I think it was a combination of us being very like proactive and getting the event out within I think about 24 hours, which for emergency is like an absolutely critical thing. But also having actually established a bit of credibility in the space by running the COVID campaign, which ran just before the Beirut stuff. So yeah, a combination of that, and that's kind of like shaped what I think is the future of this in terms of influences. Is it's less about approaching them and more about establishing yourself and letting them find the causes within the British Red Cross portfolio and even the events that they really care about, and then they decide to take part.
Yeah. Had a couple more questions from the AMA, if you will. Ask me anything. We've got Joe Knotts, Joe 77 Knots. Maybe it's Jot Knots if the 77s were T's. Anyway, at the start, how did you convince the skeptics in your organisation that there was something in the idea? Did you have skeptics? Did people not believe you?
So I with I always get frustrated with like the internal politics. It's often the thing which holds back certainly our product development the most. So I was expecting to get so much pushback from this because I thought, oh my god, gaming, people are going to automatically jump to like Call of Duty, shooting and killing people, which is completely um, against like the values of the British Red Cross. But I suppose to begin with, the first thing I had to convince people of was the potential of the market, and the thing which really like kick-started this whole thing was we ran this mass participation workshop where we had quite a few of the senior stakeholders involved, and I kind of pitched gaming, and somehow it came out as like I think I was really passionate about it, and I sold it well because there's, as I said, there's so much potential, so many great examples of how much funds have been raised, how it's strategically really great for our in terms of an audience, and it came out of the workshop as like the top thing you could try. So already there was a bit of like that buy-in from the senior stakeholders because they had like voted for it. And everyone was kind of really behind it. And then I did an ethical like screening to mitigate the risks reputationally. And amazingly, that went through kind of really easily. Um, and people were just really keen to see how it would go. So uh, I think I sold it well. I think is the answer. I sold it well by using or showing examples of what other charities had done and how much success they'd had. And I took a really serious approach to the potential reputational risks, um, and got it got it signed off from an ethical screening perspective quite early on.
And actually, as far as
Um,
charities go, from this, I don't actually have that conversation about ethics and sort of like, oh, they're going to play Grand Theft Auto. That conversation has really died away, in my personal opinion, from conversations I'm having over the last sort of 18 months. I think there does seem to be more of a general understanding that actually, people aren't awful in some respects, and but that would have been part of your
I think
assessment.
so often, I think so often charities kind of shoot themselves in the foot with risk. And one thing which always frustrates me is like, yeah, there's a risk of doing stuff, but also there's in my eyes, there's more of a risk in not doing stuff. Like if you see every other charity getting into the gaming space and you don't enter that market because you're a little bit afraid about reputational risk, that's a bigger risk to take than just not entering the market altogether.
I like that. I should get that on
I
a
think
t-shirt. That's
I
good.
think charities are starting to switch onto that, I think.
Yeah. There's been a couple more questions which I'll come to in a second, and this sort of one of them is from Miles Scheuer. Says, if reaching out to streamers influencers directly wasn't that successful, how else did you guys bring streamers to BRC? I'm going to add to this question as well. They've said they've struggled to reach a right audience through their digital marketing so far. And so what I want to sort of say to that is, and to sort of add to this, is the original product was very much gaming, streaming. It must be this is what's big. This is, the gaming industry is worth $60 billion or something. I don't know. People come out with all these amazing stats about how, what is a gamer and this sort of thing. But in terms of just getting people to fundraise for you for your let's look at your Christmas and sort of winter campaign of Operation Anti-Loneliness. What was the, again, if you can talk about this, I appreciate there'll be little internal secrets. What would you say have been some of the ways of recruiting? I'm not going to call them streamers. I'm going to call them fundraisers, because that's what they are.
That's a good way of putting it. I think, sometimes these numbers, like how much the gaming industry is worth, are really quite unhelpful, because at the end of the day, that has absolutely no bearing on how much like funds you can raise from this market. It's people who are doing a bit of gaming, or just not even gaming, they're just chatting, and they're asking their friends and family to donate to a cause they care about. That's what it is. And if you look at it in that perspective, it's no different from any other fundraising event. But the way we went about it, or the way we do go about it, is like we'd go about any other fundraising event, which is that we have a simple, clear proposition which is linked to a cause, and we activate who we think that the audience is on social media. And it just seemed to have worked for us. It didn't, as I said, it kind of bombed to begin with, and over the course of the last year, we've really we've iterated well on across the entire funnel, to the point where now we've got a good marketing funnel which works consistently. But the key learnings, because I think that you get most learnings when you fail. And when we first launched the marketing, can you still hear me, by the way? Because it's completely
Crystal clear. The video is really glitchy, but the sound is 10 on 10.
Okay, cool. When we first launched the marketing, it was I think we didn't really know who the audience was or were. We kind of tried to make it too broad a proposition to too broad an audience. So we said, like, go game for us, the coronavirus, and we targeted everyone from gamers to, like, I think what was distracting was we were seeing so many people take their hobbies into a live streaming environment at the beginning of coronavirus. Like you saw Joe Wicks doing his fitness stuff, Gordon Ramsay suddenly doing a lot of like cooking streams and stuff. So we thought, oh, actually, maybe there's going to be a huge surge of all these people that we can tap into. And actually, it was unhelpfully broad. And I think when you give people too many choices, they have choice paralysis and they don't do anything. So one of the key learnings I've found is, if you're really kind of prescriptive with what you want people to do, there's actually counterintuitively more chance of them doing that thing. So that was one of the key learnings, is just being that proposition quite specific. Tying it to the cause is a really important thing. I mean, this audience, and I suppose it's true for most charity audiences, really care about the cause. They really care about it. If you're not leading with the cause, then you're missing a massive opportunity. And if you can tie the proposition into the cause somehow, so for example, for the coronavirus campaign, we asked people to game for 19 hours for COVID-19, so it's kind of like a 19 link. And we almost just copy and pasted that same proposition for loneliness. So for loneliness, is 20% of the UK population say that they often or always feel lonely. So we said game for 20 hours for the 20%, and again it worked.
And so in that you're being prescriptive, but also really broad. Like, you're not telling people what to do. You're just saying, this is the event, but this is what we're helping.
Exactly. So I'm a big fan of not. I mean, in my dream world, I wouldn't have people game.
Correct answer. Everyone watching, take note of that. Really important.
And it's gaming. Watching people game is not what makes the funds or brings in the funds. If you just think about if you're watching a mate, watching them play a game is not that interesting. Watching them, if they've got incentives, so if you donate 10 quid, I'll down a raw egg or drink a raw egg. Suddenly I actually want to donate to that. And so I think one of my key one of the bits of messaging that I really try and get across to the fundraisers once they've signed up is almost to dissuade them from gaming as much as possible.
So use that the hook to bring them in, and then say, please don't game. Do something fun. Not that gaming isn't fun.
Yeah, exactly.
But engaging.
Yeah. Engaging is the right word. Yeah.
And actually, a question has been asked, which I'm just going to throw in because I like to make sure we touch all questions, but it also relates very much back to what you're saying now. Tom Ladd has said, do you think that live streaming is limited to gaming exclusively? And is there, this might be sort of to touch on what you've said here, is there scope to introduce a live Red Nose Day style event through this type of fundraising? And I would argue actually what you're saying here is that you're actively encouraging hundreds of people to become their own little mini Red Nose Day telethons.
What is Red Nose Day? I've heard of it, but I don't actually know what goes on.
You should. Oh, comic relief?
Yeah, but what do they do?
Oh, well, it's a... Oh, no, Alex. I'm so sorry to put you on the spot here with that. Telethon. So, televised fundraising show where you've got someone like Lenny Henry on stage saying, we're helping do all these sort of things. Donate now, guys. When we get to our next milestone, we're going to do handstands. We're going to get the BBC News presenters to do the Rocky Horror Picture Show dance routine, but we won't do that until we get to, 10 million pounds or whatever, that sort of style. And so that's something that's been, the telethon is something that's been going around for TV began and fundraising, but you're allowing people to do quite major scale things or quite major scale fundraising on a very low budget effectively and to their own personal audiences. Does that make sense? Did I make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's exactly how, if I was going to do a fundraising stream, shamefully I've still not done one, but if I was going to do it, I think it's helpful to have a bit of gaming in there, just because it's bloody difficult to chat for a long time. But I would never expect the gaming stuff to be what incentivizes people to donate.
We've seen lots of statistics exactly on that, which is that when people play games, the donations stop. And as soon as they stop gaming and talk to the audience, the donations start again. Quite simple.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the incentives that gets people to donate, and I think the fundraisers they take part because of the cause, The donors, they donate. I think some of them probably donate because of the cause, but most of them donating because they like the person who's streaming, like whether it's a friend or it's like a family member, or if you're an established streamer, it's your audience. But you're donating because the person who's streaming cares about the cause, not necessarily because you care about the cause, and that's really important to remember as well.
Yeah. And in terms of, I never asked this question before to you, but in terms of like the engage, you mentioned the sort of the engagement side of things, and in terms of how like the fundraising pages work, how people interact with their audience using polls or milestones or these sort of like these additional things that create interactivity. Have you personally noticed sort of any either key reasons why they work, or have you got any sort of notes on them? I suppose that sort of like interactivity aside, effectively, what else aside from the just donating? Have you said like here's £10, forget about it? What other stuff is there? Do you think?
I mean, all I have to do is run a report on the top fundraising campaigns. If I look through any of them, they've all got. I can just immediately see they've got milestones
Yeah.
and they've got incentives. They've got rewards potentially. It's almost invariably those people who put that little bit more effort into their campaigns have give their audience a reason to donate. They're the ones who make the money. Are you asking specifically about like examples of
I wasn't, but if you've got one off the top of your head, feel free to say it. But I wasn't going to put
uh,
you quite
I
on the
mean,
spot like that.
some classic ones are like shaving your head. Um, that always does well. Dyeing your hair. Anything to do with like consumption, like eating or drinking something. I wouldn't necessarily recommend booze because I think it can go quite badly wrong particularly if you're doing a long stream. And also, it's just like I'm not just saying this because I should, but it's genuinely important to stay hydrated, particularly if you're doing like a long stream. It can be quite um, not dangerous, but it's just not good for your health if you're boozing for that long. Um, yeah, so and actually we provide a list of examples of what people might use as
So you give them like
incentives.
a helpful right. So you've created your fundraising page. How about you try this?
Yeah, exactly.
That's nice. This is a question I don't know the answer to. Have you had any people doing music fundraisers for you? Someone has asked.
Yeah, yeah. One of the top fundraisers for the COVID campaign was a drummer,
Oh yeah.
and actually there's yeah, I think drumming is quite a big thing. I've seen, in fact, I've also seen there was one guy who did like a series of Michael Jackson covers. I don't know if he did it for 19 hours, but he did it for a few
Oh
hours,
wow.
and that raised
And can you
um,
remember what any of the type of fundraising things were that people were like? Again, I'm asking you to remember something that happened over a year ago almost. But were there any like with those music things? Were people doing crazy things, or was it like request your Michael Jackson song, anything like that?
so the drumming one, he had a really cool setup where I think you could donate and you could choose. He had like multiple cameras set up. If you donated, you could choose which camera to use. You could request a song. This is what I mean about
Nice.
incentivizing people to donate, like, and this interactivity, making the audience feel part of what's going on. And if you can do that through donations, you're always going to make money. You're always going to raise funds. Um, yeah, just and it's not difficult to think about these things. It just requires a little bit of planning, and it's much more difficult to do when you're gaming. Like talking as a gamer, the other thing which is a reason why it's not good for charity campaigns. When I'm gaming, I can't concentrate on anything else. I don't know how some streamers can like monitor their chat whilst they're gaming, let alone like try and incentivize people to donate. Um,
This is we see a lot of I'll see a lot of charities testing the water, if you like, with we're going to do a FIFA tournament, we're going to do Fortnite, these sort of things, and that exact problem is exactly what comes up. Is that you can have the most famous engaging wonderful people in the world on the camera. As soon as they put that controller in their hand, they stop talking to the audience because they want to win the game.
Mm.
So suddenly the donations
Yeah,
dry up.
yeah.
Just sorry, one
And
second.
what I would say is, I think what I'm not saying don't approach it. Uh, the video just completely gone now. I don't know. Okay.
Yeah, sorry, that was my
Uh,
bad.
I would say the majority of our audience who've taken part are gamers. Um, just it's important to emphasize the fact that I don't think the gaming um, is what makes the money. But gamers are a great audience for this because they're already familiar with things like Twitch. They're already familiar with streaming, and probably they are streaming, or a lot of them are streaming. So they're
That's
you're not
one of
getting them
the
to.
that's exactly one of the things that we've sort of seen, and why we see this world as being successful, and I think why charities lean towards the gaming angle, which is gamers typically are early adopters of technology.
Mhm.
And so they're just doing this first, which is why you're now seeing just chatting, musicians, cooking shows, all of these other things starting to come through because the technology has become more user friendly. It's slightly less glitchy according to my internet connection at the moment, but also you've got that it's becoming significantly more accessible as well. And one of the things you were talking about the gaming, one of my sort of go-to examples when talking to charities who are perhaps trying to pitch in various different gaming models. So I always like to think of gaming and Twitch streamers in the same way that I would think about a radio DJ, which is to say that they might love music, they might be able to play an instrument, but they're probably not that good. But what they are really good at doing is engaging with the audience, and when people are listening, they know when to play the right songs and how to talk back to the audience. And they might even have a really personal, vested interest in the gaming, but what they're really good at is entertaining. And when you get those guys on board,
Yeah,
that's where and I've seen it firsthand with a lot of your streams, that they're the ones that really sort of whoop do a nice little skyrocket there. I did a line,
yeah.
I realised it wasn't on the camera. Someone's asked a very good question. Claire 4444 has asked, could I ask about the stewardship of gaming fundraisers? I'm going to stop calling them gaming fundraisers. I'm just going to call them fundraisers. How do you
Mhm.
stewardship this demographic? And how do you interact with your fundraisers in the lead up to a live stream? Do you see emails working, or sort of to help these things go through? What other things have you got?
Um, so it's a really interesting one. For the COVID campaign, I was probably a lot hotter on the stewardship than the most recent one. Kind of going the wrong way, I suppose. But I think there's a perception that stewardship is really important, and in my heart, I feel like it is, and yet the data suggests that the stewardship makes so little difference to its
We have had a
audience.
lot of these conversations, haven't we?
Yeah, it's it's kind of baffling in some ways. I've seen that this is just my data. This can be completely different for someone else. But when I don't offer like a stewardship journey, the conversion rate is so much higher. And I don't know if that's just because of the campaign. I don't know if my emails are just terrible, but I think don't get hung up on the stewardship journey. That's at least what I tell myself.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's important to have the resources available. So, what one thing I should note is a big part of our stewardship is our Discord. So, at every touch point, I try and point people to the Discord because I think it's so much more. It's a much more active way of engaging with the streamers. And now we've got a really decent sized Discord. And the great thing is, when people ask questions, I am almost never the person to answer it. There's almost always someone else in the chat who can answer it and probably answer it better than me as well because they're
It's
just
a
more
really
familiar with
lovely
this work.
community you've built there. Actually, it's
Yeah,
I'll see it every now and then because I'm in there and I'll see like someone ask a question. I'll think, oh God, okay, hang on, I know the answer to that, but I'm gonna have to think. And then, as you say, two or three other people will come back with really succinct answers.
yeah, yeah, and um, there are a few people in there who are just so active that I've kind of like labeled them as like support now, um, and they kind of like carry most of the questions. And it feels like a much more personal way of engaging with people. And I get a few questions. I'll probably get like one or two questions a day of people just like directly messaging me. I think that just feels more personal. So I always try at any point to direct people to the Discord as opposed to trying to steward the verb. I don't know. People via email. I mean, I do also send like a thank you email, of course, um, but generally I have backed off. I think people just get too many emails, to be honest.
That's our feedback, which is yeah, because the email thing is quite a, especially doing the, I've seen with certain sort of types of fundraising online, you might do sort of automatic emails every time someone gets to a different point. So congratulations on hitting £50, congratulations on hitting £124, or whatever.
Yeah,
And suddenly you're just a spam bot, and do you know what, I don't want to fundraise anymore. I'm turned off, because just I'm
yeah.
turned off.
It wouldn't work for these events anyway because um, it's happening over 24 hours. So
So you'd
one,
turn
it's
on your computer and you
unlikely.
would have a full inbox immediately.
Yeah, and just more than that is that when someone's streaming, they're not going to be looking at their emails. So all of this stuff that you're saying is meaningless because by the time they read it, their event's finished.
And
Um,
do you ever drop in on streams and have a chat with people?
yeah, not so much anymore. I probably should do more of that, but I do occasionally. Yeah, I think it's useful um, to stay kind of connected to the people who are doing what you're doing, for, like actually seeing from an observing perspective what people are doing. So one thing which I do is monitor the ad comments, um, just to see like what other people are saying to their mates on like Facebook, for example.
What sort of
You can
stuff
get
do you
so much
see?
more, just like um, what people are saying. So many people like, oh, I reckon you could do this. There's been some really interesting insight that I've got. That's like when we target females, they there's a few ads where like every single comment is a female linking in a male who I assume is like probably their boyfriend. That's just a really interesting bit of insight, which I never would have been able to get had I not been actively looking at the comments on the ads. Um, and just more than anything, it's like looking at the language people use because marketing. I think the most powerful way of marketing is to just throw their language back at them. If people are using the word, um, I mean, obviously, no, there are some things you can't say, but if people are saying, "Oh yeah, let's fight loneliness," for example, then that's what you should use in the ads, um, and that's what you should be using in every bit of comms that you have with the audience.
It's quite an interesting
And this
thing
isn't just
you mentioned there, because I often think about this type of fundraising that we're looking at now as community fundraising, which is to say that, well, like your Discord, it's a whole community. You've got people who are big players and small players, but everyone's part of this community of fundraisers. And much like if you're doing a regional fundraiser in the UK or anywhere in the world, if you were a regional fundraiser, let's say in Liverpool. I don't know Liverpool particularly well. I would not be the right person to do community fundraising in Liverpool. But there'll be specific language, there'll be jargon's not the right word, idioms and phrases that you would use when regionally fundraising there. And much like on the internet, it's a community and it has its own language. So you're kind of having to learn to speak a regional dialect almost in order to market to people.
yeah.
I just made that up as I went along. I quite liked it though. What other things? The other question I was going to ask is, oh, we've just had one more question come in specifically. Oh, on the email stewardship side of things, just so is specifically an email stewardship journey doesn't have an impact, or do you see this in this with other channels? Does that make sense?
Well, I mean, I think the Discord channel works. Um,
Do you interact with people on Twitter as well, or if they're doing other stuff, like and retweet and all that sort of stuff?
oh right. Mm, no, not really. I
Short
mean,
answer: nope.
well, it would just because we have so many people fundraising for us and like hashtagging. That's the right
Yeah,
term. I'm not really a social media person. Um, hashtagging us on um, Twitter that we can't like do anything with that really.
yeah, that
I
makes
wouldn't be
sense.
able to ask the social media team to like every post, and it's kind of like setting a precedent because if you share one, it then becomes like, oh, why didn't you share that one? So if you just don't share any, because otherwise we're sharing like hundreds every day, which is just obviously not feasible from a social media perspective.
Also becomes
Um,
very unengaging quite quickly.
yeah, exactly. So yeah, I think I would like to be able to use our social media platforms in those kind of ways. And it's one of the things which is in the back of my mind is how can we support people who um, are looking to grow their audience because we have a massive audience. Um, how can we have like a kind of mutually beneficial relationship in that if they fundraise for us, we'll help them grow their audience in some way. Haven't really figured it out yet, but I would like to explore that a bit more. But no, at the moment we don't use social media really to if we're looking at stewardship in that perspective. Yeah, don't really do
Yeah.
much of that.
We've got, if anyone else watching has any other questions, probably have time for one more. But before that, I just wanted to ask. We were talking before we went live on the replicatability of this type of fundraising. So you created a product which is very much targeted at. I suppose I would maybe call it situation fundraising. An appeal or an emergency, and you've gone down that road. If you were in another charity, or indeed, do you think that anyone could enter this space?
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
if
so we
so,
were
how would
talking
you
about
do
this
it?
because um, the honest answer is I don't know.
Yeah,
But the only experience I've got is running this from the British Red Cross, and I think a lot of people have heard of the British Red Cross, so it is credible in that sense. If you're talking about like a really small charity, I think it might be more of a struggle, but I think it's perfectly possible to still make this work. It just might be a bit more difficult. Um, but certainly, any like semi-large charity should not have any problem. Um, but I suppose one of the interesting things is that we haven't really gone out to our existing audience base. I'm sure there are probably a few streamers in there, but just because of the way that our team is set up in terms of like targeting new audiences, we don't tend to look at our existing audience base um, because that's not really what we're set up to do. So maybe the starting point for other charities is to look is to just to find like potentially the what we would call the early adopters within your own existing supporter base, and then build the product around them because they're going to be the people who are most committed. Find out what they want to do, how they want to fundraise for you via gaming and streaming. And once you've got that kind of dedicated following, and make a Discord and see if they are willing to support the Discord as well. I'm sure they will be. That's probably the approach I'll take, and
yeah.
then do a bit of marketing on well, through Facebook. Uh, but certainly the risk I always see with trying to like approach influencers, because that might be a strategy that you would consider, is that there's the potential of just like wasted time. Like, at least with marketing, you kind of know you're going to get a few people. With influencers, there's a potential that you could put hours in and just not get anything back. So I see it as more of a risk in that sense.
Interesting. So,
So I'd
in terms
always
of, and for your marketing that you've done, and I suppose you'll do again. You mentioned Facebook. Is this a type of marketing that you're like it, this is me speaking out of ignorance, but like I was going to ask, are young people still using Facebook? That's probably not a fair comment to say, but obviously you're capturing Instagram in there as well. And do you
Mm.
like see interesting uptakes on Facebook versus different platforms in terms of who signs up and who clicks?
Not done any print.
Fair
um,
enough. Just a
I think
curiosity
I think
question.
Facebook is definitely like starting to dwindle a bit. But yeah, Instagram is still live and kicking. There's so many channels that we haven't yet touched into. Like we haven't even looked at YouTube and Twitch, which is where the streamers are. Um, there's TikTok, which
Yeah, I mean that's
yeah,
that's a conversation for another day because you guys have been one of the lucky few to be on there.
yeah, yeah. So exactly, we've got a great like TikTok following. They're the perfect audience. I mean, begun to touch into that. There's just so much more we could do, which is why I get like excited. And it's more than just like a product. This is a whole program of work. We haven't even looked at like the corporate side of things, the working with gaming developers and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, there's so much more that we haven't touched into. Um, this is a real digression from the
No, that's
original
fine.
question of what would I do
Well, what I was going
at
to,
small charity.
I know we're coming to the end of the hour, and I was going to also ask, like in term, there's been a lot of there will unquestionably been a lot of lessons learned from this type of fundraising, and the people engaging with it. Do you see? I'm going to. I'll. I'm from Tiltify. This is on the Tiltify channel. I can be totally biased. I always feel a bit like dirty for mentioning it. But do you see this style of fundraising, not necessarily live, but more interactive, encroaching to other spaces of fundraising? So we've started in the gaming, but could it be used for something else?
Yeah, definitely. So um, one of the one of the first ways I saw this engaging way of fundraising was actually from my team. Um, we've got a product called Miles for Refugees, and so as a team we signed up. Essentially, you like run, walk, or cycle a certain amount of miles to support to raise money for refugees. And one of my team, she had an incentive on there. She just wrote it on her profile saying, if you donate 20 quid, I'll draw you a picture, because she does a bit of art on the side.
Fantastic.
Um, yeah, that's so simple. It's using your kind of skills, but it's giving people that reason. So there's absolutely no reason. I mean, the great thing about streaming is that you can see that live, which is so powerful. Like,
Sure.
and you can have these forfeits which people can watch. Like, you could actually draw, um, you could paint that picture live as well. So I think it's like the level up, but certainly you can take some of this incentive mindset into all parts of fundraising.
Yeah, no, I think there's a lot coming out of it. I thought one of the things that sort of got me excited years ago about this type of fundraising is it kind of brings back old school fundraising, how we used to fundraise before the internet, because we kind of got quite
Mm,
comfortable in, oh yeah, sure, here's a tenner, donate, done. But if you go back 30 years to the village fair, it's like, yeah, I'll pay £5 for the coconut shy, and I'll pay £10 throw a sponge at the head teacher, and all of these other aspects which make you part with considerably more
mm.
money. Last
Yeah,
question.
exactly. It's
Oh,
kind
sorry,
of
go on.
kind of like a value exchange, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Last question. This is a cheeky one. Don't feel you have to answer it. How are you targeting fundraisers with a skill set to stream? So I feel like a bit Alan Partridge doing that. OBS is for the more tech minded. Any target words or groups you'd be willing to share?
Um, how do I target streamers? Is that the question?
Yeah, the technically minded. Oh, hello, Captain
Um,
Kirk. We've been raided. That's fun, isn't it? Hello, raid. Carry on.
um, I don't know if we've cracked that one yet, to be honest.
Okay. They just seem to find you.
Well, I think because we're targeting such a broad audience and just gamers. as I said, they're kind of familiar with these terms already. Um,
Yeah.
and I suppose, like any funnel, it's about just trying to make sure that you're going to get mostly drop off, but the ones who do go through, you're giving them the right information at the right stage. And this is what I mean about the kind of iterating on the different stages of the journey. You become a bit more familiar with what you should be providing at each stage. So to begin with, it's mostly around just pushing people to the landing page. And then it's about giving people a bit more information about streaming. And I suppose the dream is to be able to distinguish between someone who's familiar with streaming and someone who's not, and creating like separate journeys for these different audiences. So the person who streamed before doesn't need so much like hand holding, whereas the person who's never streamed before but is keen to try it, you create this stewardship journey, whatever that looks like. I don't know if it's going to be email, but it's something where you give them the information that they want, and that could be like what equipment they need to buy, actually how do they set it up,